presented by Brian Cox and Robin Ince. The producer is Alexandra Feacham. And as usual, you can hear an extended version of the programme by searching on BBC Sounds for the Infinite Monkey Cage podcast.
40% might seem like a high number.
Incorrect.
Number crunching.
19%, 13%, 4%.
Fact checking.
No further supportive evidence has emerged.
Calculating.
If I had $100 in the market yesterday, what's it worth today?
Tim Harford and the team are back to explain the numbers all around us.
Is there any data to support or to disprove this idea?
And answer your questions.
Do children spend less time outdoors than prisoners?
Is Mars the closest planet to Earth?
Or is it Venus or Mercury?
The new series of More or Less starts on Friday afternoon at 4:30 on BBC Radio 4.
Where it's 5 o'clock and time for PM with Evan Davis.
Hello there. It's almost as though they never took a break.
We're 81 days away from what is potentially a cliff over which we must not go without a deal.
Well, I don't buy the cliff edge thing for a start.
Parliament voted overwhelmingly in the end to accept the result of the referendum.
Having a no-deal outcome to Brexit would be deeply damaging.
Yes, it's a new year in Parliament, but we're facing the same old choices. Tonight, we focus on no deal.
It's madness that we're doing this, if I may say that. We're
doing what?
We're planning to fail as a country.
We'll hear from Kent as truckers rehearse some no-deal Brexit moves. Also on PM, Hugh Sykes reports from South Africa on the 25 years since the end of apartheid.
South Africa was never really emancipated in terms of basically the revolution. We were given democracy, which was a version of capitalism that was sugar-coated. The white people have the money, the black people don't have money.
And in 2017, Hastings Pier won the Sterling Prize for Architecture.
You don't get a vision of the pier until you get out the far end. And you get out there and you go, aha.
But it's all gone wrong. You can't get out to the far end. It's closed until at least March. The architect behind it laments its fate. With the BBC News throughout the hour, Neil Nunes.
The government has come under pressure in the Commons to give more details of any progress made in securing improvements to Theresa May's Brexit deal. The Prime Minister has said she's working on getting further assurances from Brussels so she can win a vote on her withdrawal agreement next week. But Labour has accused ministers of trying to run down the clock in an attempt to blackmail the country into supporting a botched deal. Here's our assistant political editor, Norman Smith.
With just over a week to go until the vote on Mrs May's Brexit deal, there is so far no sign of any easing in the opposition the Prime Minister faces. In the Commons this afternoon, the Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay told MPs it was a good deal and the only deal. However, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accused the Prime Minister of deliberately trying to run the clock down towards a no-deal outcome in order to intimidate MPs into backing her agreement, while the former Conservative Chancellor Ken Clarke urged the government to delay Brexit Day. Number 10, meanwhile, have held out the prospect of further reassurances over the Northern Ireland backstop. They've also not ruled out the possibility that the parliamentary recess in February could be cancelled to ensure more time to get Mrs May's Brexit deal through Parliament.
The Chief Executive of NHS England, Simon Stevens, has insisted that a new long-term plan for the health service is ambitious, but also realistic, practical and costed. GP surgeries and community care will get the biggest funding increases, but unions have warned of the impact of staff shortages on the NHS. Dominic Hughes has this report.
The 10-year plan for the NHS in England is certainly ambitious. Through better prevention and detection of some of the biggest killers, such as stroke, cancer and heart disease, it's hoped that nearly 500,000 lives can be saved in the next decade. There's a strong emphasis on moving care away from hospitals and into the community. More money for GP services, for example, and greater support for older people to maintain their independence. And mental health care is also a big priority, particularly improving access to help for young people. But the immense challenges the health service faces right now, financial strains, growing demand and missed targets, have led many to predict that fulfilling these ambitions will be extremely tough.
A man has appeared in court accused of murdering a fellow passenger on a train from Guildford to London last Friday. Lee Pomeroy, who had been travelling with his 14-year-old son, died after allegedly being stabbed 9 times. Darren Penseal, who had earlier told magistrates that he was paranoid and was hearing voices, was remanded in custody until next month. Angus Crawford reports from Guildford Crown Court.
35-year-old Darren Penseal, who's from Farnham in Surrey, appeared in court charged with murder and possessing an offensive weapon. He stood briefly to confirm his name, date of birth and nationality. Later, his partner, Chelsea Mitchell, who's 27, denied one charge of assisting an offender and was also remanded into custody.
Kevin Spacey has appeared at a court in Massachusetts accused of sexually assaulting a teenager at a bar on the resort island of Nantucket in 2016. The Oscar-winning actor and former artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre was charged last month with indecent assault and battery. He didn't enter a plea, and the case was adjourned until March. An 18-year-old Saudi asylum seeker has left the hotel in Bangkok airport where she had taken refuge after she was given a temporary entry permit. Rahaf Mohammed Al-Kunoon left the airport with staff from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and Thai officials. She arrived in Thailand from Kuwait over the weekend, saying she feared she would be killed if she was sent back to her family, who she has accused of being abusive. Melissa Fleming of the UNHCR said her case was now being assessed.
We have been given assurances that she will not be sent back. They have said this publicly. Right now, she's been moved to a place that is safe, and UNHCR colleagues will be with her and will be, speaking to her and taking the time needed to assess her situation properly and to come up with some kind of solution for her future.
Melissa Fleming of the UNHCR.
Thank you, Neil. Well, it's Groundhog Year. We're back to where we were 3 weeks ago, last year, but now with only 81 days to Brexit, a bit under 12 weeks. The choices haven't changed. There's the Prime Minister's option of the deal. There's the option of delaying or reversing Brexit, probably with a second referendum. The option of a softer Norway-style Brexit. And the one at the centre of attention today, a no-deal Brexit. In the weirdness of this period, there are those saying we must prepare for it while hoping to avoid it, those who want to avoid it so we don't have to prepare for it, and those that want to prepare for it in order not to avoid it. We'll head to Kent shortly to hear about the Lorry Park trial preparations there, but Brexit was back in the Commons this afternoon. Here's Jeremy Corbyn.
The government is trying to run down the clock in an attempt to blackmail this House and the country into supporting a botched deal. She's refused to work with the majority in the last few months in a desperate attempt to spark life into what is actually a Frankenstein monster of a deal. We're now told if we don't support it, the government is prepared to push our whole economy off a cliff edge. And to prove this, no-deal preparations are underway.
Well, the leader of the opposition went on to say,
"The government is fooling nobody. These shambolic preparations are too little too late. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, there is no majority in this House to support no deal. Why won't the government face up to this truth and stop wasting our time and our money? The Prime Minister should be here updating MPs on what progress she has achieved, if any. Instead, she's continuing her approach as before Christmas of ducking scrutiny and dodging accountability. We will hold this government to account for their incompetence."
Jeremy Corbyn in the Commons this afternoon. The Prime Minister not there, in fact. It was the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, who was listening to that speech opposite him. But let us go to Kent, because there they have been doing some rehearsing today. This is an official experiment involving trucks, some road and a disused airport. Today saw the Department of Transport stress testing what happens to heavy goods vehicles in the event of no deal. Luke Jones for us is at Manston Airport near Ramsgate in Kent and sent us this report.
Do you do the Dover route often?
Yes, all the time.
In an old, disused airfield, which wouldn't look out of place in an episode of Scooby-Doo, lorry after lorry was stacked this morning. It's a rehearsal. If there is no Brexit deal and there are customs checks at Dover. This Manston airfield, the M20 and the M26 will be where lorries are stacked or queued.
They don't know what goes on. They think they do, and they come up with plans like this. This bit here is a single lane.
Yeah.
And when they let trucks go, that's going to be chaos. And when you're running 200, 300, 400, 600 trucks up there every day, it needs a bit more thinking.
89 lorries were here this morning to test the queuing and the drive down to Dover.
I don't worry, because I think we'll get it right eventually. And I really do think we're going to go into a no deal.
You do?
I really do. I think it's going to happen.
So this is proper rehearsal for what is going to happen, you think?
It will happen bigger. Obviously, the airport will fill up. But as long as they stage it like they've staged it and tweak it here and there, I think it will work very well.
I followed the route and it was all reasonably smooth, to say it was meant to be rush hour. But the maximum the Department for Transport has accounted for here is 6,000 lorries. What would that kind of hold-up do to businesses who rely on this route? I went to the office of one of the drivers here today, Simon Wilkinson.
I run a small international transport company. Our daily business is running trucks through Dover and back. It's madness that we're doing this, if I may say that.
Doing what?
We're planning to fail as a country. I've been to see my clients in Belgium. I've been to see Belgian customs agents. And nobody has got any information.
But I guess is the worst that can happen is that there'll just be a bit of a wait at Dover. You might have to queue.
Yeah, but these trucks cost 400 quid a day to sit still. Who's going to pay for that? Potentially could sink all of us. There's not many British international hauliers left anyway.
And what would you like to hear in the most ideal situation possible? You ring up Theresa May and you say, "Hello, Theresa. This is what I want." What do you say?
What would I say? Isn't it apparent that this is a really bad idea? For me personally, it's either a deal or no Brexit. Just give us some answers.
Are you angry?
Yes, I am. This is my livelihood, along with hundreds of others in this country, and apart from leaving, there's nothing else of any clarity that we know of.
Luke Jones brought us that report and talking to one of those truckers who may be affected by it. Well, let's talk to Lord Lilly, Peter Lilly, Brexiteer, author of 30 Truths About Leaving on WTO Terms, released today. Attempt to bust some of the Project Fear myths around the whole idea of leaving. Very good evening. Thanks for coming.
Good evening.
Yeah. What do you make of this experiment and what that gentleman was just saying about the kind of the mess of it all for a no-deal Brexit?
Well, as I understood it from the person who was actually involved in the experiment, it showed that there was not going to be a problem. He said that they were planning for up to 6,000 lorries being queuing up during 2015, when we had 23 days of hold-ups in Calais because of the blockade by the fishermen, the immigrants blockading the tunnel and so on. There were 7,000 lorries and delays of 35 hours. That's bad, and we should be prepared for it. But I think it's much more likely to happen as a result of that sort of problem than it is for Brexit, because we're planning for it. And be quite clear that it's not delays that will be caused by customs at Dover. Dover have said they'll give priority to flow over compliance. In other words, they'll wave people through.
It's not the stuff coming in, it's the stuff going out.
So when it gets to Calais.
Yeah.
If Calais is not prepared. Now, Calais is much better prepared than has been reported, or is preparing much better. There, I understand, introducing 3 new lorry lanes there to cope with the potential 2-minute delay that they expect for each lorry. They're introducing a scanner that will be able to scan trains moving at 30 kilometres an hour. They're building a border inspection post somewhere way, way away from the port to handle animal imports without causing congestion. And they've said their priority, the French priority, not to be nice to us, but in their own interests, to ensure smooth flow so that don't lose trade to Zeebrugge, to Rotterdam and to Amsterdam.
And that's very much
every reason to keep it going as would we.
The spirit of your document today is that this will all be fine. It's not going to be nearly as bad as everybody's saying. Can we just go through some bits of it? Because it makes an interesting read. So the £39 billion payment, you're basically saying we'll save most of that if we have a no-deal Brexit, right?
Well, by definition, it's part of the deal. It was.
I mean, the British government have said we would effectively rule ourselves out as being regarded as reliable partners in future international deals if we didn't pay.
Well, the House of Lords has said there's no legal liability to pay any of this if we leave without an agreement, and so have city lawyers.
Yeah, but the government.
What I say is we should be prepared to put it to international arbitration. I think we've got an extremely strong case. We'll probably keep nearly all of it, but if not...
I don't want to get stuck on it, because where I want to go with this is, would you acknowledge it's going to be a very acrimonious divorce if we don't pay it? That whatever you say, they're not going to like it.
Not if you agree to go to arbitration. They could.
You don't think it'll be acrimonious? Because you also say in your thing, we'll soon get a Canada plus deal. We'll be able to have a trade deal with the EU. And even while we're arguing about it, there'll be no tariffs. Now, my contention to you to discuss is if we have an acrimonious divorce, refuse to pay them the $39 billion, the chances of them talking to us with zero tariffs about Canada Plus is just not going to happen.
I've said we should go to international arbitration rather than simply refuse.
Yeah, but even with that, we're in fantasy land, aren't we? That the idea they're going to sit and have no tariffs and say, OK, let's talk about a free trade deal.
No, well, the chances of us getting a good deal from them, promising to pay that up front before the negotiations start, reduced the chance of getting a good deal to very low levels. Once if we leave without a withdrawal agreement, or if we make it clear that we're prepared to, they will start saying, oh, actually, we'd rather have the money. Let's reopen negotiations on the basis of what President Tusk offered on the 7th of March and repeated on the 4th of October
not to the whole UK.
For a Canada, where he didn't actually, he addressed it to the whole UK. Yeah. Everybody assumes not. We've got to extend it to the whole UK, and that means resolving the Irish border question, which everybody has said they will resolve without border posts, without border checks, if we leave without a deal.
You and I have discussed that on this programme before. Look, we don't have much time. What is interesting is that Brexiteers are joining in what I think you would regard as Project Fear about no deal. So Michael Gove, a prominent Brexit campaigner in the referendum, has been warning about the damage to agriculture, the tariffs that would be put on agricultural exports, meat exports to the EU in the event of a no-deal Brexit, and how damaging that would be to farmers. What I want to know is is he what has happened to him in your view? Is he like gone native? He's now just joining in Project Fear?
He is a member of the government. The government has decided to put this appalling, in my view, deal through. The only way they can get it through is by frightening members of Parliament that any alternative is even worse, hard though that might be to imagine. So
he has gone
joining
in.
Well,
he's joined in Project Fear. He's making it up like the others are.
If you're part of the government, you have to pursue government policy. That's one of the costs. I, as a member of government, often had to go along with policies which I wasn't enthusiastic about because the broad thrust of the government I did approve of. And he's in the same position, I think. But I accept that tariffs on agriculture would create problems. Overall, of course, the agricultural sector would benefit because we're net importers, but there will be some sectors which lose and others which gain, and we would have to offer generous support to those that lose while they're adapting to the loss of any potential market on the continent.
Lord Lilly, Peter Lilly, thanks for coming in. 17 minutes past 5. Let's get a quick summary of the headlines with Neil Nunes.
Pressure is mounting on the government to give details of what progress has been made in securing changes to Theresa May's Brexit deal. MPs have been told that a vote on the withdrawal agreement will take place in 8 days' time. Dozens of lorries have taken part in a test run near the Kent coast to gauge the readiness of a no-deal Brexit. Some hauliers said it was too little too late. The Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey has appeared at a court in Massachusetts accused of sexually assaulting a teenager at a bar.
Thanks, Neil. Well, the main rollout of the much-maligned universal credit has been put on pause while a pilot of 10,000 claimants is run. Now, the pilot scheme will run for a year starting this July. The system, as you may know, aims to unify multiple different benefits into one payment, but has been controversial since it was launched and has been blamed for rising use of food banks and severe hardship for claimants. There are still relatively few people on the new system, and those are people making new claims. The big challenge facing government is migrating 3 million claimants of existing benefits over to universal credit. Well, in Parliament this afternoon, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Amber Rudd, clarified the timetable for the universal credit rollout.
There will be a 10,000-person pilot this summer, and that will help us learn how to be most effective about the managed migration. We have 1.4 million already on through natural migration, 1.6 million expected to come on during the next 12 months, but making sure that we get the managed migration effective, efficient, compassionate is absolutely central to the success of universal credit, and that will be coming forward in 2020.
Amber Rudd. Earlier this year, the BBC's Becky Milligan travelled to Liverpool to see how universal credit is affecting people there, and she met Martin, who is unemployed and has severe learning difficulties. Becky asked him about his fears of switching to the new system.
Are you worried about moving from one system to another?
Yes, I am, really.
Why? What are you worried about?
Not having no money for a certain length of time, and not being able to pay my bills and not being able to pay my rent.
Because that's what you've heard, that it gets delayed, people aren't paid immediately.
Yeah. It's not just by friends, it's by jobs, my advisors themselves at the job centre.
Well, Linda Cooper's the Liverpool Bootle manager for Christians Against Poverty, and she's been helping Martin, and she joins me now. A very good evening to you, Linda. And do you welcome the fact that there seems to be a pause here while they work out how it works?
Oh, yes. Christians Against Poverty, we do welcome the pause, because I think there's many issues that need ironing out.
Yeah. Tell us the difference between the issues around people making new claims and people on existing benefits who are going to be part of this migration process, sort of moved over at some point.
I don't think there's a lot of difference between the two from what I can see, because even those people who are migrating over still have to put in a new claim, as far as I'm aware. And so they will go through all the same struggles of the new existing claimants.
And so someone like Martin, who may be told you've got to do it online or something like that, might find it, that's not what he's used to doing and not what he's going to find very easy to do.
Yeah, one of the most significant challenges, I think, for most people is digital exclusion, especially people like Martin, who doesn't have a computer at home, doesn't use a smartphone. If he had to go to, say, a library or a public agency, he may only be limited to how long he can use the computer.
It's going to be a lot of work for organisations like yours.
Definitely, yeah, because the changeover and the migration is raising up a lot more debt with rent and priority debts, because people unfortunately have been used to budgeting weekly or fortnightly, and suddenly they have to learn to budget monthly.
Yeah. What, apart from the online digital process for claiming it, what would you say when they do this pilot for 10,000 people? What should they be looking for that they need to change to make this thing work?
I think they really need to look at the online process, and it's quite a complicated process, the online application. They apparently give a 40-minute limit to complete it, but we know that it takes probably an hour and 40 minutes. And once you start the claim, which is the most significant, you've got to carry on till you're finished. You can't save it and pause it and go back to it the next day when you've been and gathered some more information together that they may need.
Sorry, why can't you do that? That's a bit weird.
It is. That's the way that it works, I believe.
When you buy something online and you put it in the little basket or something, it will sit there and you can come back a day later. It'll still be there begging you to buy it. I mean, that's... But you're saying their system doesn't do that. You start the application, you have to finish.
Yeah, you've got to start it and complete it all in one go. It makes it difficult to complete, especially if you're in a public place or using a library and you haven't brought the correct information with you, and you may have to start the process again.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting and really practical point. Linda Cooper from Christians Against Poverty, thanks for talking to us about that. Let's talk to Heidi Allen, a Conservative MP for South Cambridgeshire. Heidi is on the Work and Pensions Committee and joins us from Westminster. Very good evening to you.
Hello.
They don't just need to pilot this, they actually have to change it as a result of the pilot. Is that right?
Well, the whole system needs looking at through the eyes of the sorts of claimants like the gentleman just in your clip there, that will be coming across to the new system. And that's the point, that to be fair, that the year of learning, of piloting, was always in the plan. That isn't a new thing that Amber has announced. What's changed is that as MPs we won't be asked to vote on everything in one go. We'll just have to vote for that 1 year, 10,000 claimants pilot, and then we'll vote again on regulations once we've established the best process for them.
Right.
But what the year will do, will allow, and the DWP have already said they're going to do this, is work very closely with the various charities out there that understand what life is like for claimants with particular vulnerabilities.
But you wouldn't have voted for it. If they'd gone to a vote in 2 weeks' time, you would not have voted for it, would you? You would have rebelled.
Honestly, I don't know, because the way that the regulations were going to be presented, there were other aspects in there as well, some protection around severe disability payments. It was a bundle of items, if you like. This wasn't the only item in there, so it would have been difficult to vote against that. But certainly, I've been speaking to Amber an awful lot, both on my own and also through the committee, to convince her that the migration regs did need to change, and had a suspicion that she would do that. So it's great news, really, that we've heard.
Yeah. So you're definitely welcoming it.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a sign of weakness in government that this kind of... It's not like this is sprung upon us. We've known there are problems with universal credit for months, if not years. Well, actually, for years. Is it a sign of weakness that it's so hand to mouth, that kind of just weeks before you're meant to vote on it, the vote is pulled?
I think... The universal credit is, I think everybody underestimated just what a massive project and what a massive change it was. It's not just an IT project, it's a cultural change as well for claimants. If you think of tax credit claimants at the moment, they have a very light touch contact with the government. It's actually with HMRC, it's not with the DWP at all. Once a year, what have your earnings been? And then we leave you alone for a year. Whereas in universal credit, it's a monthly relationship, you've got a work coach. Culturally, it's a massive change as well. And I think perhaps that was underestimated. And because the system has been built live, until we've got significant volume of claimants onto it, that's when you identify some of the problems. So yes, do I think some things we should have seen coming, but I think it's also fair to say that some of the IT glitches and process problems, such as the lady just before was describing, you don't really discover some of those, not all, but some, until you actually start to put real numbers through the system.
Can I just change the subject a little? I'm not going to ask you about Brexit per se.
Assumed you were.
No, I'm not going to, actually, but you will know that outside Parliament a lot is going on. The journalists are there, on the green, the cameras are out there filming interviews all day at the moment because of Brexit. Your colleague Anna Soubry has called for police action. She's been verbally abused by protesters outside there. There are more and more of them. Other MPs have expressed unease about even going out there and say it's very intimidating out there with the shouting and the bullying. Yeah. I just wondered whether that was your experience.
It is. To be fair, we only came back to Parliament today. I haven't done any media out on College Green today, but I did before Christmas, and even then, it's a very febrile atmosphere. It feels out of control, and I wasn't with Anna with what happened to her today, and she was attacked verbally just before Christmas as well, but I've seen the videos and it's unacceptable, and I don't really understand why, but the police at the moment don't seem to be doing very much. I appreciate it's public land because it's outside of the estate, but she had difficulty even making her way into the building, and protesters were sort of blocking her entrance, and as MPs you don't want special treatment, but this is, we had a policeman killed here not that long ago by somebody breaking into the estate. I just think we need to up the security a little bit because it feels like it's very, very much out of control. It's not a nice atmosphere out there.
Heidi Allen, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
The seaside town of Hastings in East Sussex is not one of the richest in the country. Some of its neighbourhoods are among the most deprived, and yet it had a reason for massive civic pride: the restoration of the town pier after it burnt down in 2010. It was redesigned and rebuilt into a wonderful new style pier, an uncluttered public space, a serene expanse reaching out over the sea, usable as a platform for any event or concert. With the involvement of local supporters, it even went on to win the prestigious Sterling Prize for Architecture. In fact, declaration of interest, I was a member of the jury that awarded it that prize in 2017, not long ago. But it has all ended very sadly indeed. The charity running it couldn't make it pay. It was put into administration, sold to a private owner who's fallen out with many in the town. The goodwill has turned sour, and the pier has been shut until March.
The winner of the 2017 RIBA Sterling Prize for Architecture is Hastings Pier by DRMM.
You don't get a vision of the pier until you get out the far end and you see this horizon to horizon and you actually say, now I get it. You get out there and you go, aha.
The future of Hastings Pier is once again in the spotlight tonight after its new owner, Abid Gulzar, announced it was closed until March.
We want to know the plans. We need to know that the pier is being well cared for and looked after.
Well, the Battle of Hastings Pier. It's a story that speaks to the future of the nation's piers and what we do with them, to the future of ordinary towns and whether they can ever pay for sparkling public assets, and to community involvement in the development of such things. I spoke earlier with the award-winning architect of the pier, Alex de Ruycker, and I asked him about his vision for its rejuvenation.
There was a groundswell of support for the idea of a new kind of pier. It also had to be a restored 19th century structure. So we set about repairing and renewing and restoring what remained of the pier after the fire, and working with the community effectively not only raise money for its restoration and repair and renewal, but to gain ownership of the pier. Yeah, we resisted the temptation to do a kind of big destination building or set of buildings on it.
The new owners' model was very much the traditional pier, basically.
I believe so. I've looked at the application, and to me there is no architectural ambition there. They're simply putting up some accommodation in order to run some arcades.
Many people in Hastings paid £100. I don't think they ever expected to get it back. They were shareholders in the charity.
Yes, there were thousands, actually.
And a lot of money was raised that way. Does this tell us that model doesn't work? You need professional owners of things for them to work.
The idea of public ownership of the pier was fantastic, an absolutely valid model for that pier and for other spaces too. And not many businesses are successful in the first year, let's face it. You know, in its day, it hosted fantastic acts, the likes of Jimi Hendrix and The Who and the Kinks and the Stones, and that special event can happen in a special place. It is one of those special places where popular culture in the UK was born.
It famously won British architecture's top prize, the Stirling Prize.
Yes.
You were the architect who picked up that prize. Looking back on it, should it have won that prize, would you say now? Because it didn't have a sustainable business model that could keep it alive.
Well, it should absolutely have won for the very originality of the process and the product itself, and the fact that as a business it didn't work, was not known at the time of the award. This came as a big surprise to everyone. The success of the project is that what some people describe, as a masterwork of minimal intervention with maximum effect has given a great number of people a great deal of pleasure and will continue to do so.
Who do you blame for this, Alex?
I think there was such a degree of optimism around this project. Sometimes that naive optimism is what makes the impossible possible. That's what happened.
Architect Alex de Ruycker, who led the team to renovate the Stirling Prize-winning Hastings Pier.
People were wrestling with some of these issues 1,000 years ago.
The Long View with Jonathan Friedland.
The Long View takes a current issue and finds a historical precedent.
Understanding the present by studying the past.
We're saying, look, we've been around this block before. We got through it before, and perhaps even there are some lessons we can learn.
The new series begins with the Conservative Party divided over how Britain should trade with the rest of the world. In the early 1900s.
Human beings have an uncanny habit of replaying the same dramas again and again.
The Long View returns tomorrow morning at 9 on BBC Radio 4.
28 minutes to 6, a summary of the news now from Neil Nunes.
Pressure is mounting on the government to give details of what progress has been made in securing changes to Theresa May's Brexit deal that would satisfy its critics from across the political spectrum. MPs have been told they will vote on the proposals in 8 days' time. But speaking in the Commons, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accused Mrs May of deliberately running down the clock in an attempt to blackmail the country into supporting a botched deal. The EU Commission has again ruled out renegotiating the terms of the withdrawal agreement, stressing that talks with the UK were closed. Nearly 100 lorries have taken part in a road test to measure the possible impact of extra congestion on the route to the Channel ports if there's a no-deal Brexit. The lorries made trips between Manston Airfield, which could be turned into a giant lorry park, and Dover, but haulage groups labelled the exercise too little too late. A man accused of killing a father in front of his teenage son has appeared in court. Darren Penseal allegedly stabbed 51-year-old Lee Pomeroy 9 times on a London-bound train on Friday. Mr. Penseal, who is charged with murder and possessing an offensive weapon, was remanded in custody until his next court appearance in February. The Oscar-winning American actor Kevin Spacey has appeared in a court in Massachusetts, where he is facing allegations that he sexually assaulted a teenager at a bar on the island of Nantucket in 2016. Mr. Spacey, a former director of the Old Vic Theatre in London, was charged last month with indecent assault and battery, allegations he denies. 2 groups of migrants have been picked up following a search after an empty boat was found on a beach in Kent. One group is understood to have been discovered on a nearby road in Dungeness. 3 other migrants were found 3 miles away in Lydd. Now the currency and stock markets. In London, the 100 share index closed down 27 points at 6,811. A short while ago in New York, the Dow Jones was up 179 points at 23,612. Against the dollar, the pound is trading at $1.27.5, and against the euro, it's at €1.11, making the euro worth 89 pence.
Thanks, Neil. At the start of the programme, we looked at some of the arguments around how we are preparing for a no-deal Brexit. What we know, though, is that that's not what most MPs want, and efforts are underway to prevent it. One approach is for MPs to persuade the Prime Minister to rule it out. She has that power if she chooses to use it with the backing of Parliament. Another approach is for MPs to get stroppy and force a shutdown of government if the Prime Minister keeps no deal on the table. MPs have that power by depriving the government of money. And a third approach is to try and orchestrate a pivot to a softer Norway-style Brexit that would secure support for a deal with the EU. And one man who is now proposing this, he calls it Common Market 2.0, is Robert Halfon, the MP for Harlow, a former Conservative minister. He joins us now. Very good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Right, so tell us about Common Market 2.0, because it sounds very like Norway Plus or some of the ideas that have been going around already.
Well, what we've done is I've come together with Lucy Power, a Labour MP, different party, different constituency, different views on Brexit. We're trying to bring people across the House together to support a proposal called Common Market 2.0, which in essence delivers on the referendum result of the British people, because it takes us out of the common fishery policy, the community agricultural policy. It takes back control of our in terms of justice and home affairs. It takes back control, taking us out of political union. So it delivers on the key things that the British people were concerned about. But at the same time, it provides certainties for business. It gives us a good trading relationship with the rest of Europe. It creates an alliance of democracy with other European countries like Norway and Switzerland and Iceland. And it's a measure that in essence squares the circle.
But let's be honest, it doesn't deliver on what a lot of people want, which was an end to free movement. Because you're basically saying we stay in the single market, we stay in a customs union, we have no say over the rules, and Europeans can continue to reside here in unrestricted fashion.
Well, actually, members of EFTA do have a say over single market rules, and many of them have significant derogations from single market measures. National parliaments are much more powerful, and we're not subject to you would not be subject to the European Court of Justice, only the EFTA courts. And on freedom of movement, if you look at the deals around the EFTA arrangements, the rules, it says very clearly that there are safeguarding measures if there are any big societal, economic or environmental issues in respective countries which allow a break on free movement.
Is it not the case that what you're promoting this today tells us is we are just going around in circles on this debate? We could have had this argument 2 years ago. This is just Norway. You've got some details in there. This is Norway Plus. We're just running around headless chickens in circles.
Well, at the moment, it looks like the House of Parliament are not going to vote for the Prime Minister's deal. So what is important is that MPs from all sides of the House can get together and offer a solution that both delivers on the referendum, provides certainty for business, takes back control away from the CFP,
some control,
CAP.
Yeah.
You're out of the CFP, you're out of CAP, you're out of the European Court. So it's quite significant. You do have some control over freedom of movement, as I've set out, and yet we have a good trading relationship, providing certainty for business. That is something that unites the House of Commons. The DUP have said themselves that they are open-minded about this approach, and it's a deal that would be acceptable, and I hope very much that it can be supported.
Don't we basically have to remove some options from the table in order for everybody to decide whether to support your one or the deal as it currently stands and the political declaration that it currently stands? Because at the moment everybody's clinging to their first preference vision of this and until we remove some options we're going to carry on going round in circles.
Well, it may be that is the answer, that actually in the House of Commons MPs are presented with different options, but I think that the Common Market 2.0, as we've set out, is something that will actually get support from most MPs on all sides of the House of Commons. And if the Prime Minister's deal does not pass, then it is something serious, something concrete that we can offer the British people, delivering on the referendum but keeping a good trading relationship with Europe.
Robert Halfon, thanks for talking to us. Now, there are going to be lots of anniversaries this year. The start of the Second World War, that was in 1939, the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and the new South Africa will be 25 years old in the spring of this year. The black majority country was liberated from minority white rule in 1994, with the first democratic elections April that year, and of course they brought Nelson Mandela to power. Since then there's been progress with housing and education, but the economy is not healthy and there's a rising tide of resentment at corruption. Our correspondent Hugh Sykes was in South Africa for this programme in 1994. He's been there many times since. He's just back from a trip to reflect on the 25th anniversary of South Africa's liberation and on whether the fortunes of the African National Congress are now starting to fade.
ANC 1994, 62%. ANC 2004, 70%. ANC 2014, back down to 62%. Some opinion polls suggest that their support could drop to near 50% this year.
I would vote for DA.
Democratic Alliance?
Yes.
But the ANC brought freedom.
It brought freedom, I understand. But as for now, history is in the past. Now we are living for the present and moving forward with the future. We are no longer living in the past. Yeah.
Naledi Masingi, an office worker in Durban. A marketing manager in Johannesburg, Nailwe Mashego, told me that her politics was shifting away from those of her parents.
I was more following the parents and what they felt the ANC did for them rather than making my own opinion. Some people are getting better lives, but not at the rate we thought that it would be happening. There are still kids who have no money to go to school, a huge amount. There's still people who are still unemployed, a huge amount. There's still areas in rural areas where there's no water. I really don't want to say it's the ANC's fault, but they do play a part in it. They do play a part in it. And it's also our fault for putting so much faith in them.
Hello.
Hi. Can you buy me some bread?
Some bread?
Yes, I'm hungry. Oh, can you give me some 5 and I buy some bread?
What's your name?
My name is Enoku.
Inoku?
Yes.
Okay, Inoku. Nice to meet you. My name's Hugh.
Yes. And some juice. Some juice. Yes, some juice is 2 rand. A bread is 5 rand. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Some of the gratitude to the ANC for liberating South Africa from white majority rule is being replaced by impatience at the slow pace of progress with the economy, poverty, power cuts, housing, schools, jobs, and by disgust at corruption in government, bred for themselves instead of for little Inoku in Soweto. There's disgust at former President Zuma building himself a thatched-roof ranch at public expense and claiming that the lavish swimming pool was actually just a fire pool, a reservoir for water in case the thatch was set alight. Disgust at state capture, allegations that wealthy businessmen, in Russia they'd be called oligarchs, bought themselves extensive influence in government. Not something that Gugu Hlope from Soweto ever imagined might happen as she queued to vote in those first elections in 1994.
At the time, we didn't really care about the queues. We were just interested in being able to do what our parents, even our great-grandparents, great-grandparents, was never, ever, ever offered the opportunity to do that. To think, feel, speak.
She's now a project manager in the construction industry, and she's furious about corruption in South Africa and believes it's time for another fight here against some of the new ruling class.
Those that are in the government, the rotten politicians. If a village or a community is meant to get services, the minute you take from somebody that's supposed to get something, you're stealing. It's plain theft. It is plain theft. We now have to, once again, fight to get what we should be getting.
Both the main opposition parties now use the old liberation rallying cry, Amandla, which means power.
Forward to 2019, forward!
Julius Malema at an EFF rally. He's Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, who hope to double their vote at the 2019 elections.
We are the government in waiting for Manibo.
Thank you very much, Central Command Team.
The military language is part of the image. Mr. Malema is now often seen wearing a red militia-style beret and a red boiler suit, and he styles himself the Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, and he has Commander-in-Chief printed on the back of some of his red shirts.
I am the leader of that government in waiting.
Through the windows of a bar in Soweto, I spot a cluster of red berets with the Malema EFF badge on them. Inside, I spoke to activist Umholi Ngoma. Tell me something about the rather military presentation of the EFF. What's all that about?
It is the continuation of the struggle which has always been there, where basically South Africa was never really emancipated in terms of basically the revolution. We were given democracy, which was a version of capitalism that was sugar-coated. The white people have the money, the black people don't have money.
And this is a Democratic Alliance rally demanding power, and a question for their charismatic leader, Mmusi Maimane.
I meet many people who say, we really like Mmusi Maimane. And then I say, so you're going to vote for him? And they say, no, we can never vote for anybody other than the ANC, because the ANC brought us freedom and liberation.
The ANC has lost direction. South Africans are becoming more and more unemployed. They recognize the need for change. That's why the ANC's percentages are declining. The economy of South Africa is a clear indicator of a government that's failing.
The ANC say that all the problems of South Africa is a legacy of the terrible years of apartheid.
It's deeply misleading. Schools are not being built. It's not a legacy of apartheid. It's because the ANC has misspent the money. If we keep looking there and setting that as the standard, there's no incentive for us to want to move forward.
But at a community centre in Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, ANC supporters Miriam Makubela and Abel Mangolele reject Mmusi Maimane's assertion that South Africa isn't moving forward.
No, I don't think it's so long. When you look at the population and as where do we come from as blacks, we have developed more than before.
One of the critical things is finding employment for everyone. It's not long term. Even if you talk about people who were born in post-apartheid, those people have not yet started working effectively. So basically, we have not seen the actual outcome out of the freedom.
A Soweto guesthouse owner, Dolly Hlope, 70 years old, and liberated from apartheid by the ANC, who enabled her business to exist, acknowledges the profound problems facing South Africa, but sticks by her party.
Whose fault is it?
Well, the government's fault.
Maybe it's time for a different government.
No. That's a no. Different government is a no. I've seen change in my lifetime, thanks to the ANC. I'm loyal to the ANC.
Hugh Sykes reporting there. And in fact, tomorrow Hugh will be telling us about white farmers murdered in South Africa and the politician accused of encouraging the killings. Let's get a quick summary of the news with Neil Nunes.
The government has faced calls in the Commons to give more details of any progress made in securing improvements to Theresa May's Brexit deal. The European Commission has again insisted there can be no renegotiation of the withdrawal agreement reached with the Prime Minister. Dozens of lorries have taken part in an exercise in Kent to assess the potential traffic congestion which might be caused by a no-deal Brexit. A man charged with the murder of a fellow passenger on board a London-bound train last week has appeared in court.
Thanks, Neil. Well, Kevin Spacey has also been in court this afternoon on the wealthy island of Nantucket in New England, facing a charge of sexual assault of a teenager. Nada Tawfik is outside the court. And Nada, why don't you just remind us about the what he's accused of and what happened on the night of the alleged incident?
Well, he's accused of groping an 18-year-old teenager who was working as a busboy at a restaurant here in Nantucket called the Club Car in July of 2016. Of course, that busy summer period when many celebrities fill this island. And according to the accuser, he was starstruck to meet Kevin Spacey, and the two of them hit it off and started talking after he finished his shift. And Kevin Spacey started buying him drinks throughout the night, telling him, "Let's get drunk together." But he says the night took an odd turn when he realized Kevin Spacey was trying to hit on him. And at one point, Kevin Spacey groped him and unzipped his pants and grabbed him. Now, at this point, he said he was Snapchatting with his girlfriend and caught part of the alleged attack on video. But Kevin Spacey's lawyers have, in kind of court hearings previous to today's, tried to really argue that this was a consensual encounter.
And what actually happened in court today, Nada?
Well, this was a very brief court appearance. It was when Kevin Spacey was read out the formal charges against him. He came in wearing a suit with his lawyer and actually didn't say a word the entire time. But his lawyers later entered a plea of not guilty for him. Now, the judge also said that he would have to not have any contact with his alleged accuser and that he wouldn't be required to appear at the next court hearing, which is scheduled for March 4th. Now, Kevin Spacey had tried to get out of coming to this court appearance today because he thought it would increase the negative publicity around the case. But he wasn't successful with that, of course, and there was intense media coverage of his appearance.
OK, Nada, thank you very much indeed. Now, there's been an interesting debate on social media today, prompted by an article in The Spectator magazine about identity. It was called "Identity is just as important as wealth. Why don't economists get that?" It's a plea for everyone, really, to respect people's sense of belonging to a group or a nation, not to be sneering about public adherence to a flag, for example. Identity, can it explain Brexit, nationalism, football, racism, any number of things? The writer of the piece was Rory Sutherland, senior advertising executive and writer. Also with us is Anne Pettifer, a political economist, former advisor to Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. I'm not sure how much you're going to disagree, but Rory Sutherland, give us the case. You think it's a healthy instinct to want to belong to a group that excludes some other people.
It's both a healthy and an unhealthy instinct, but it's undoubtedly innate, and I'm not sure it's something we can self-correct that easily. Very interesting book written presciently, perhaps 20 years ago, by George Akerlof and Rachel Cranton, is actually called Identity Economics. And what that suggests is that our sense of identity, both personal and collective, is to us almost like a source of a form of wealth. Now, just to give a very simple example, you and I think, even if we were offered an enormous amount of money to become actuaries, and indeed were perfectly mentally capable of becoming actuaries, would not feel comfortable in that role because it doesn't sit well with our personality. And similarly, at the collective level, people actually see adherence to a group and membership of a group as something of value. It's harder to quantify than money, but if you think about it from the point of view of someone who's poor, it's every bit as valuable as money. Someone attacked me. They said, but identity doesn't pay my gas
Exactly.
bill.
You can't eat it.
I can't turn up and pay my mortgage with a flag. True in a sense. On the other hand, money can pay for a taxi home from the airport. Identity gives you two mates who'll willingly pick you up from the airport for free. which is more valuable is debatable.
OK, I want to hear Anne Pettifer. Anne Pettifer, what do you make of that argument?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. Rory's right on this, that we have the sense of community and of belonging, and it's incredibly important to us. But actually, when the crunch comes, what's more important for us is our economic interests. And we know that because people move from the north to London. They move from rural areas to urban areas. They move from Africa to more affluent parts of the world. And they do this not willingly, and they do it, and it's extremely painful for them. You know, when we see, for example, Pakistani communities in Britain, they try to recreate their traditions, their community, their sense of belonging, their religion, because they miss that painfully and terribly. However, if it comes to the crunch, they need to move just for survival purposes often,
but
really.
we can agree both are important, can't we? That you know, your sense of self and what you are and your place and the meaning to your life.
Yes.
But the economics also matters. And
yes.
The English are in a very peculiar position here, as Orwell noticed quite a few years ago. I'm 3/8 English and 3/8 Welsh, and it's perfectly OK for me to express Welsh nationalism and solidarity, albeit, given my accent, slightly implausibly. But if I actually started becoming an English nationalist or patriotically English, this would be viewed as something faintly dodgy and possibly even racist. And I'm not quite sure where that double standard comes from.
What I find difficult about Rory's argument is this, that what people are really looking for is security, economic security. And I think where I differ from Rory is that governments are supposed to give us security. We have evolved a process in the administration of governments for the simple reason that we cannot individually protect ourselves from threat. That's why I have governments. And when governments fail, as I think Rory and I agree they have done, when they fail to provide economic security for their people, as they, for example, failed to do in Africa, their people have to move. And the fault then is the failure of government to provide security. No, so that's what this, you know, so if we're threatened by climate change, there are plenty of us who don't believe in climate change. But I think it's really the role of government to protect our security. You know, it'll make us very insecure, climate change.
But even then, the very redistribution that you would presumably like to see depends for its general acceptability on a degree of shared identity. So
Rory, I didn't mention redistribution. I talked about security. Governments are there to make us feel more secure economically and in defence terms, and I will argue also from climate change.
But we vote, Rory's point is we'll vote for a government that will deliver all those things, and we'll pay, we'll respect that government if we have a sense of a community that we're
That's
all
right.
part
But
of.
what the reason I think we have Brexit, why we have Donald Trump, why we have Bolsonaro, why we have Duterte in the Philippines, is that governments have inflicted economic insecurity on individuals and communities, and they're mad as hell, and they want a strong man, invariably a strong man, to protect them from the threats that governments are not protecting them from.
I take a slightly different view, which is I think we're in danger of living not in a democracy where people actually are allowed to choose what it is they want and value. We're living in an econocracy where economists are allowed to define what's good and valuable for people.
I come back, it's not economic, it's security. It's,
well, it's economics.
But actually, identity is a vital insurance policy, particularly the poorer you are, of course, the more important it is, because the more you depend on reciprocal altruism for childcare, for
But can we just talk about the practical application, say, to Brexit? So one would imagine that Irish nationalists 100 years ago weren't saying, is GDP going to be 4% bigger if we shake ourselves?
No, I think the American War of Independence was probably economically a bad idea.
At the time.
In the short term, certainly. Yeah.
So does that mean, in your view, Rory, we shouldn't be doing these kind of Brexit calculations of sort of plus or minus 4 or 5% of GDP?
Well, one of the things I've said is, I mean, a sense of shared identity is really rather valuable, particularly at times of crisis, in that nobody fought World War II in order to regain access to key export markets. They did it actually out of a sense of national pride.
No, I disagree. They did it out of a sense of insecurity. We were going to be invaded by the Nazis. I mean, it wasn't that complicated, Rory.
No, but that forges, I mean, fear forges a sense of identity, but that identity is in itself valuable because much of what humans achieve as a social species.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you, Anne, whether you think there's a problem with people being sniffy about ordinary people's desire to feel a sense of belonging to a group. That there's a sort of, the wrapping themselves in the flag, for example, or football, or any number of things.
I think this is where Rory and I rarely agree, which is that the patronising, paternalistic project fear of the Remain camp was totally unacceptable, totally patronising. Yes. This is the London elite saying, we know what's good for you, we know what's going to happen, we can expect it, and we don't care a damn. We who were responsible for making you feel insecure now don't care a damn for your feeling of insecurity.
I might add that Londoners are very unrepresentative as a group because nearly all of them have moved there from somewhere else. So in one sense, your identity as a Londoner is very much one of cosmopolitanism and internationalism. I don't think we'd be having this discussion in Birmingham or Manchester or anywhere else. One of the things I notice is the extreme Remainer point of view isn't really found anywhere except London and perhaps Scotland.
We have to leave it there. Anne Pettifer, Rory Sutherland could continue. Thanks both very much indeed. Let's get the weather. Chris Fawkes is here.
Hi, Evan. Thanks a lot. We've got a deep area of low pressure crossing the north of Scotland, and that's brought some very stormy weather. We've had a top wind gust of 76 miles an hour recorded at Wick Airport, and there have been reports of some localised damage and some disruption across the far north of Scotland. And indeed, as we go on through the rest of the night, it's going to stay pretty windy for much of the night in the Highlands, Aberdeenshire, Orkney and Shetland as well, with those winds taking a good while to calm down. Elsewhere, we've got a weather front, a cold front, sinking its way southwards at the moment across England and Wales. Just a lump of cloud, really, with a few spots of light rain or drizzle on it. Well, that will tend to push southwards overnight, and eventually the skies will clear. However, the northwesterly winds will be with us all night, and that's going to prevent a frost for many of us, with temperatures overnight ranging from around 3 to 7 degrees Celsius. Now, looking at Tuesday's weather picture, I think generally it's going to be a much brighter day with more in the way of sunshine, but it may well be sunny, but it will be a little bit cooler and fresher as well, with temperatures ranging from around 7 degrees Celsius in Scotland to about 10 degrees in the south. It may well stay quite cloudy at times in Northern Ireland, western fringes of Wales and parts of southwest England, but I think still for most areas, a dry and bright day with sunshine. A few showers, though, brought in on northerly winds affecting northern Scotland and eastern coastal counties of England. That's the latest weather.
Thanks, Chris. Our studio director today was Paminda Gandhu and the editor was Sophie Bockham. Have a very good evening. Remember the drama on Channel 4 at 9.